I'm Lance Bush. I'm president and CEO of Challenger Center, the nonprofit organization founded by the families of the Challenger astronauts. We're thrilled to host today's discussion. It's about the new Netflix docuseries, Challenger, the Final Flight. Everyone knows the story of the tragedy that occurred nearly 35 years ago, but what makes this series so special is that everyone involved, from our team at Challenger Center to the families, to the entire group of filmmakers, they were committed to honor the Challenger crew, recognize them as the incredible husband, wives, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, and friends that they all were. And so we really appreciated, from Challenger Center, we really appreciated this approach. And here at Challenger Center, we carry on their legacy every day, and we're happy to have another opportunity to shine a spotlight on these incredible people as we get to talk about them in their lives and hear about them from their loved ones and from the producers and directors who created this story for us. So I'm gonna get us started and just introduce our panelist for this evening. So everybody knows. First up is, I want to introduce is Glen Zipper. You see him on the screen. Maybe people can kind of wave their hand a little bit. That's Glen. He's the executive producer and co-creator of this. And we'll hear a little bit more from him and the others of how they came to this. Next is Stephen Leckart. He's the co-director. Hi, Stephen. As well, we have Daniel Junge, co-director. Welcome, Daniel. We also have Alison Smith Balch. She's the daughter of pilot Michael Smith. And we have the wife of Commander Dick Scobee and the founding chair of Challenger Center, June Scobee Rodgers. Welcome to each of you. Thank you all for being here tonight. So I'm just going to get us started right away. I want to start with our filmmakers. And I want to start with you, Glen. Can you share with us and everybody here how this project was started? Whose idea was it, and how did this all come to life? Because I think everybody really enjoyed the feedback we're getting. Is everybody really enjoyed this? So how did this come to be?
Well, Stephen and I had worked together on a number of projects, and we're looking for something else to do. And I believe it was around one of the anniversaries of the Challenger when there was a lot of memorialization on the radio and print, on the internet. And we came across an NPR story on Bob Ebling separately, and then we both started talking about it. And after, I think on the first night we talked about it, we decided that Challenger was the next project that we wanted to embark upon if we could pull it together, which was going to require the cooperation of many different people. We couldn't just make it happen because we wanted it to happen. And soon thereafter, I think we raised $15,000, and we went out to Utah and we met with the Ebling family, and Bob Ebling had unfortunately already passed away. But we met with his daughters and his widow, and it was just a remarkably powerful experience to be talking to them and getting their first-person perspective of what it was like. And in that moment, we were sure that we had to do it. And you introduced me as someone who had co-created the series. It's sort of a term of art in the business, but Daniel Junge has as much ownership over this as the rest of us. The reason Stephen and I have that credit is we began the journey, and we took some risk, and we did those initial steps, but it was Daniel and Stephen who together really created this project and brought it to the world in its current form.
Thanks, Glen. And just, I think, and I'm not sure you covered this there, but was there a little bit of when you said this was a story you wanted to do, was there, had this harkened back to, back when you guys were younger? And I want the audience to miss that point.
Yes, well, I was in the first scene in the series is very personal to myself and to Stephen and to Daniel, because we were those kids in a classroom with the box TV being wheeled in on a cart. Personally, I was in algebra class. We weren't watching it live, and another teacher rushed in and she whispered something into our algebra teacher's ear. And then our teacher turned to us and said something terrible has happened, and we're going to go into the cafeteria and the whole school's going to have to watch this. It's going to be very disturbing, but it's history, and it's important that you participate in it. And that left an indelible mark on me. And I carried it with me for 30 years until we started the process of trying to get this series made. And, for us, in a certain way, it was a catharsis, nothing compared to what it would be like for the families and the people who were direct participants in this tragedy. But to be able to help tell the story, and for us also a unique way in was, we'd seen a lot of Challenger documentaries and the story told in a lot of different formats, but we weren't really familiar with the families. We hadn't really seen the story told from the inside out. And we've talked about this a lot. We would talk to people from our generation, generations older than ours, who thought they were incredibly familiar with had everything about the tragedy. Then we'd ask them to tell us who the astronauts were. Most people, sadly, really only can remember Krista. And to us, that wasn't acceptable. And that was really the driving force for wanting to tell this story and wanting to acquaint audiences with 7 heroes, not 1.
Thank you. I think you guys did a phenomenal job of it. Hey, many of our teachers, much less students, were not even alive when we lost the Challenger these days. So was the length of time since this accident a barrier in filming and finding support for the project?
No, I would say it was sort of the opposite. I mean, to Glen's point, people sort of thought they knew the story, but there was so much that we dug out in the research, and we spent 4 years researching the project. And so much of what we dug out dated back to the beginning and the origins of the shuttle program itself. And I think the class of '78 and just how unique that class was, how diverse that class was, both in terms of gender, ethnicity, religion, but also background. We had scientists and doctors going into space, not just these white male fighter pilots. And I think that alone allowed us to see that most people just didn't know the connection to Challenger, and that, 8 years later, the seeds of that were planted on that mission. And so I think once we started talking about the project and we were ready to take it out, and part of the beauty of Daniel coming on was it allowed us to figure out, okay, this isn't a movie. It's too much for a movie, it's a series. But we just didn't know exactly how many episodes or how to structure it. And that was something that when Daniel came on, we really hammered home, okay, it's 4 parts. And we knew exactly what happened where and when, and we knew some of those big tentpole set pieces, if you will. And then we just had to fill in the blanks of, okay, who are the people who are gonna tell the story? Who's still around? Who's still, cogent? And who will talk to us? And even kind of before we shot anything, we went to the Challenger Center. And it's important for everyone to understand that we felt that we had to talk to the Challenger Center first and foremost to get your guys' blessing to do this project. And we hoped that we would get a couple interviews. We weren't sure how many of the family members would want to talk, but we knew by having that relationship, coming to you guys and saying, this is sincerely what our vision is and we want to do this. Can you help us? And thankfully you guys listened and said, yes, we will. Without that, the film would have been very different. But I don't think it was that difficult to find support once we got in the room with people and explained, here's the vision. Netflix, basically, I've never been to a pitch that was that sort of warm and receptive. And I left there feeling very confident. We had a very great partner in this.
Wow. So, even for us, some of this is new information about even how Netflix was so receptive right from the beginning. It's good to hear that for us. But now that this series has been out for 2 weeks, I'm curious about the feedback that you've been receiving. Stephen, be interested for you and Daniel to share, what are you hearing from your friends, colleagues on feedback of the film, of the docuseries?
I'll be curious what Glen says as well, because we've all been involved in quite a few projects, but this one is really unprecedented for me in terms of the feedback I've gotten. A lot of unsolicited people coming out of the woodwork, and a lot of people from that high school experience where I watched the tragedy with my high school. A lot of people reached out from there. And but what's been very surprising to me is the level of emotion that it's brought up. And certainly that's been true with people close to the tragedy or tangentially related to the tragedy, but people who just experienced it like we did from a very distant perspective. And I don't know if that's a testament to, hopefully it's testament to the way we did it and the fact that you get to know all of these incredible human beings so well, rather than just talk about the science and the doom and gloom of it. But it also probably speaks to just where this sits in our collective, our collective conscious, even to this day, 35 years later.
Yeah, it's amazing even to me, who's been in this community of space exploration for all of my life, that when I travel as the CEO of Challenger Center, somebody meets me and asks me what I do, and I tell them a little story, and almost always they respond by saying, they tell me where they were, what they were thinking, and they remember the moment. So, you know, I think you've done a phenomenal job of capturing that and sharing back the deeper story. And we're getting great feedback too.
There's two pieces of feedback that I've been getting, and I see on Twitter and other places, that I found really heartening in one respect and really cool in another. The cool part is how many people, once they got to know the astronauts, are just blown away about, I don't think this is foul language, how badass they were. And there's like so many younger kids out there who now want to be like them, which is just so amazing to see and brings such a smile to all of our faces. The other thing that's really interesting is a lot of people talking about the time and place where a Challenger story takes place, and how it feels like a better time, which we weren't really expecting, where, you know, in the face of tragedy, the nation came together. And there was no blue, there was no red, it was just us together. And to see that and to have that conversation even seated a little bit is wonderful.
I'll add to that, because I was so young for the shuttle. I was a child, such a young child. My memory of the shuttle was only positive, minus watching the explosion and watching Challenger. Because by the time Columbia happened, which is another tragedy, which we of course mentioned in the series, but we don't cover at length, I was pretty much adult. I was in college. So my experience of the shuttle by that point was somewhat jaded by what had happened with Challenger. And so going back in time as a storyteller, I felt it was really important that our first episode really picked people back up. That's why you see Neil Diamond in there. We felt it was important to really pull together the romance of what the shuttle represented. And it wasn't hard to do that, because looking at the archival footage, it was there. It was such a spectacle. And so I always felt like I was kind of trying to tap back into my childhood wonder of the shuttle. And I wanted the series to do that for people who weren't alive to see it, so that they knew that this is what it was. This was so cool. And it didn't matter who was president at the time, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat. Space was cool, the shuttle was cool, the future was bright. And I think now more than ever, given kind of living through a pandemic, people are optimistic and hopeful for that again, and we're looking for that. So I think we just wanted to capture that as best as possible, and I'm proud that younger people are seeing that.
Well, I want to say, Daniel, Stephen, Glenn, you're right on. You put that thing into context of the 80s, that, you know, you don't always get to see. I mean, people get so focused on the story, they don't put it into context. And I think a whole bunch of us who are watching are saying, yeah, I'd like to go back to the 80s at this moment in time. That looked great. And there is a lot of hope going forward. We're in the heyday right now of incredible leaps forward in space. So, and I thought you as well, you made the point that you really brought to life these incredible individuals. So I want to get to that right now. I want to move over to talking about them a little bit. And for that, I want to go to Junge and Alison and ask you, kind of start into this and say, why was it important for you to be a part of this film? So Junge, can I start with you? Why was this important for you to be a part of this?
Well, thank you, Lance. But at first, I wasn't so receptive, thinking that, do I really want to relive the worst day of my life by talking about it once more? But once I learned, primarily from Stephen, what their vision was, I began to understand that it was going to most likely be a very credible presentation with the people who were there at the time telling their own story. Even as it begins with Bob Crippen, he sets the stage for the 70s and 80s. And that was well done because Cripp has never given an interview regarding Challenger. And congratulations on that one. Then I thought, well, perhaps there'll be more joy in this than there will be sadness. But what I saw was great surprise. And many of the reporters have asked me how I felt about it. And I said it was like a roller coaster ride of emotion because I'm excited and joyful to see images of the people I love so much, my husband, my friends, and see them at one of the most exciting days of their lives prior to the accident. We were so happy. We were so overjoyed. The top of Dick Scobee's career when he got to be the commander of a space shuttle mission. So I was happy to accept to be a part of it once Stephen told me what his vision was.
Thank you. Alison, why did you decide to be involved?
Well, we trust Challenger Center. And so when you approached us and had said that you had already looked into this, we took the next step, talked to Stephen. It was clear that he had a love and a vision for this story, which resonates to me as the daughter of Mike Smith. And so we decided to give our voice to this. We decided to give our words to this and saw it as something that was unique in the way Stephen explained that the story would be told, but the astronaut stories would be told also. And the unfolding of that he laid before us, like there was no way we wouldn't have decided to join them. And we're very pleased with the outcome.
Yeah, Alison, I remember talking with you and your mother about this. And first of all, thank you for the vote of confidence in us. But I remember talking to you and expressing that, you know, this is an opportunity for you to talk about your dad. And both you and your mom, one of your reactions, I still remember it to this day, was that you both loved Michael so much. You loved your dad so much and think he's just so great, and that you would love to share the stories of him. And that really touched me, is thinking, you know, it's wonderful to have, you know, a father, daughter, a husband who thinks that way. And, you know, I personally enjoyed watching the film and seeing some of the backstories, but I'm thinking, we have a moment here, Alison. So you have so many stories about your dad.
Mm-hmm.
I know you'd love to share some. So is there something that didn't make it into the movie? You're just like, I'd like to share this story about my dad, or insight that we have a moment now.
Well, excuse me, it goes without saying, he was a terrific father. I remember being 9 years old and Scott 11, and he asked us, hey, what do you think about me being an astronaut? And his main goal was to spend time with us that he could not spend as a Navy pilot. And so we moved to Houston, and you know, we got to see my dad from when he came home from being an astronaut to when he left to go be an astronaut. He was dad. He was just our dad. He was the dad who, gosh, I thought every child in America had a pile of sawdust in their garage, because my father was always building something. He, in Maryland, he built an office in the basement. Next to it, he built some swings in the basement so Scott and I could enjoy, Aaron wasn't born yet, could enjoy indoor activity when it wasn't nice out. we moved to Houston. He built a boathouse. My mom said she came home from an errand and he was already tearing up the carpet and framing the large room my sister and I shared upstairs. He would find spaces in walls and build drawers. I can't say never, very, very rarely did my father not have a project he was doing. He did not sit around. He was interested in learning what he didn't know to accomplish what he wanted to do. I guess I would describe him as a kind of shoulder to shoulder dad. He just had this running conversation with us always. And if he wasn't doing a project, he was teaching us to ski or teaching my brother and I to run our lawn mowing business. And he valued that he wanted us to recognize that it was a valuable thing to be a smith. And in that meant we needed to communicate well with our customers, take care of them, not cut any corners, take care of our equipment, learn how to do the books, all that. So he really was very well-rounded, and he was fun. I shared with someone recently the story of he'd say, hey, let's go on a family bike ride. And so every once in a while, we would always wait and hope he would do this. About halfway around the neighborhood, he'd say, okay, kids, if you can ride your bike from this spot all the way home, but you have to be able to pull into the driveway without touching the handlebars. So no handed, then you'll get 2 scoops of ice cream next time we go to Baskin Robbins. Like he was so much more than being an astronaut. When he went to work, he put his head down, he did the best he could. And then one of my favorite stories that I was thinking about a couple months ago and realized that it has carried through to my parenting is in 9th grade, first semester, I was always an A student. Well, I was making a grade in a class way below an A and was really disheartened, but I knew I needed to tell Dad. And I went into his room where he had his desk and he was sitting there working. I said, hey, Dad, I need to tell you something. And I told him about the grade, and I'll never forget his response. He said, Alison, did you do your best? And I said, you know what I did? He said, hey, then just move forward and put this behind you. And you could ask my girls, I never made the connection until recently. You could ask my girls how many times I have used that. Did you do your best? Well, that was December of 1985, and he died the next month. But that represents how he raised us kids. He just talked with us, and through that we saw the wisdom in how to live and how to work hard and how to treat other people with respect. And I would guess that a lot of the people he worked with would second me on and third me and fourth me that he was well respected because he did such a great job living his life. And I could go on and on. And he hugged my mom a lot in the kitchen. I have lots of memories of he just would hug her. So
gosh, you've increased his reputation even more here. And now I'm like, God, I got to up my dad game.
Oh. He was very humble too.
he sounds fabulous.
He's a good dad. A good dad.
So June, how about you? Everyone was so moved hearing the story about the Valentine that Dick had in his briefcase for you, his thoughtfulness there. Is there another story that you didn't get the chance to tell that you now think, I'd love people to hear this about Dick?
Well, yes, Alison, we could talk on and on, couldn't we? But I think hearing Alison's story about her dad reminded me that each of those crew members on that flight were family men and women. They loved their families. So the first thing anyone asked was about each other's family. And Dick, and as the commander and Mike as the pilot, they were the best of friends. Both shared in very similar hobbies. But Dick was very humble. He married a not so humble wife, but a modest wife. But he was very humble, and an example of that was when he returned from his first flight. And he was so excited to tell the story about what that flight was all about. And I asked, but didn't that make you mad that on national television, when President Reagan was talking with you, he forgot to mention your name when he mentioned all the rest of the crew. And he said, no, June, what was important was the mission. So he was a team member, a very mission oriented. He was very modest. For years, if anyone asked him what his job was, it was, I'm a pilot. And then once he became a flown astronaut, they wouldn't settle for that. And in public, people would run over to him and talk about his being an astronaut and what is it like. And he just said it was a great opportunity, lots of people involved. And then he would turn to me and he'd say, I want you to meet my wife. She's the one with the honorable profession. She's a teacher. And just keep turning the questions to me. So he was a wonderful dad to our children. All kinds of great experiences I could share about that, particularly about flying with our son. Our son could fly an airplane before he got his license for driving a car. So that was a great father-son opportunity. My daughter wanted to go, Kathy wanted to go into reporting and writing and public relations. And she asked if she could interview him one time. And he said, you know, that interviewing, that kind of scares me. But let me take you flying in an airplane. So it was just his idea of flying was his interest and his love, and joyful memories that that all of us could share about each of our loved ones. But he was great. And just at this point, thank you so much, fellows, because watching the other families, seeing Cheryl McNair talk about Ron was terrific. And seeing Marcia Jarvis, she gave such a wonderful interview about us, especially that bit about the sunrise and a morning and the new beginning. That was admirable, as well as the Smith family. I so much enjoyed that. And later I talked to Steve McAuliffe about it, and he grinned with me about his part, that they, even though he wasn't interviewed, there was a number of film opportunities and photos about him. So he was, I think he was very happy with the representation of Krista, as are all of us.
Thank you, June. I'm always continued to be impressed by the stories of Dick. There's some stuff I just learned there that I had not known before. You know, one thing to point out is that this love of flying that, and June, I think she actually restrained herself this time, because that love of flying was handed down to her son, who is a general and a pilot himself, a very successful person in life. You know, I think the impact of the fathering was there, and the love, and just wanted to share that. So Glenn, Stephen, and or Daniel, I'd love to hear from all or any of you want to answer this in whatever order. What do you want people to take away from this series? What impact did you want the project to make on people? I mean, I know it was kind of, you wanted to tell a story, but was there an impact you wanted people to take away from this once? And you know, because maybe once you got started and you did it, you might have changed your thinking. So any thoughts on this?
Yeah, the simple one that I personally felt, and I think other people agreed with me from the beginning, was just this idea that space is for everyone. It's not just the purview of the military. It's not just the purview of white men who fly jets. It's for everybody. And I think that that's the one it would stuck with me throughout the making of it. But now on the back end, hearing the feedback, as Daniel mentioned, I feel like what I'm also proud of is hearing that people who witnessed it when they were younger and never made sense of it and kind of blocked it out of their minds, that it's been a bit of a healing for them to go back and to see who these people were. and to understand more about it, and even to understand that we're all sort of fallible, we all make mistakes, and to hear the family members talk about forgiveness, it's opened up conversations with people that I just never would have expected. So the idea that it even can offer healing to people about this national tragedy, that's something I don't think I quite expected, and it caught me off guard, and I'm really grateful that we had the opportunity to do that.
Wow.
Yeah. Go ahead, Glenn.
There's a lot, actually. You know, we have a lot of ambitions when we make these things, and you know, this one particularly so. We do want it to be a cautionary tale as we're going further and deeper into the unknown. We want to remind people of the risks that are at stake. As I alluded to earlier, the film does speak to a different time in our nation's history when we were all rallied together. And to the extent that it can remind us that we can behave and treat each other as one, that's a really worthy ambition for this project that I think is taking root. And also I think that the project can serve as an inspiration, because there's remarkable strength in this story as it relates to our nation, how we persevered through a tragedy, and more specifically the families, you know, June and Alison and everyone. To be able to get through that, to carry on, actually not just carry on, not just to survive, but to create something as special as Challenger Center. You know, so we're going through very difficult times right now, to say the least, and it may actually get worse before it gets better. But the strength that we have as a nation and as individuals, I think there's, not to be jingoistic, but I think there's something uniquely American about that. And I hope this series can help remind people of that inner strength that we have as a people, and that we can use that together to get through what's ahead.
Great. Daniel?
It's just, that's well put. I would leave it at that. I can't top that. That's beautiful.
Sorry, Daniel.
It was beautiful. And we are, and you know, it's interesting, space exploration has always been kind of a rallying point of pride, and I think it as well today. So Alison, want to go over to you and say, how do you feel Challenger has changed history, and what do you want people to take away from it? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, history is a study of the past, and so looking at the 35 years since Challenger, the Challenger disaster happened, I echo what y'all were saying. It was such a unifying time in our country, in our world, really. And June would probably agree with me. Like, I think every family received, I would guess, 10,000 letters from all over the world. I mean, they brought them in bags, and people wrote letters about how they were feeling, and they covered us in compassion and filled us with encouragement and sent their prayers, and that had healing on us, you know. And then I remember, that was in the first couple of weeks after Challenger, I remember sitting next to June, and I can't remember where we were, June, maybe on an airplane somewhere, and she just kind of did the little cocktail napkin, like, this is what I'm thinking about, encouraging all the family members to join into this idea for Challenger Center. And I can't even guess how many people have been impacted by the Challenger Center. Last week, I talked to a friend who works at the Kennedy Space Center, and he shared with me a project he's been growing over the past 3 or 4 years called the Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned Project. And he has been able, with his group, to go out, and he meets with people who have nothing to do with the space program, but they're human beings who are better after he comes and teaches them, better communicators, better decision makers, better, you know, it's the people at universities and sports teams, and all these people he's reaching because of the tragedy of the Challenger. And then I would be remiss not to share how it's changed my life. You know, I mentioned in the series the root of anger and bitterness and sadness, but my history did not stop there. As the crying 14-year-old, at the Reagan service. You know, I met my husband. He shared the gospel. My whole trajectory for eternity is different. I've been able to share my story with over 70 groups of people and hear their response, which really coincides with what Glenn, you and Stephen were saying, is that there is a unity that comes from tragedy. And then that suffering, what I would want people to take away, and this applies to every person who ever was born and died and remembers their life in between, is that don't waste your suffering. Suffering is what creates perseverance, creates character, and then gives us hope. And I don't think anybody would not want hope, especially today. So yeah, history, Challenger has really, yeah. I won't add to what I said.
Wow, that was way more than I even expected. You are, as to the how many people have been affected by it, I mean, the big numbers we don't know, but I can just tell you from a Challenger Center perspective, we've worked with over 5.5 million students to date. And those aren't like from today's virtual, you know, that you click on something. These are like in-person, educational programming, and we have people who are actually working as STEM professionals and in the space program today because of their work on this, and it's been inspired by your loved ones. So
I love that. I met a next door neighbor next to my grandmother this week and mentioned this series to her and said, you need to watch it. She said, oh my gosh, I was a teacher. I always referenced Challenger Center. They had such great information about STEM. So she already knew. Yeah, yep. Go Challenger Center.
Great, that's excellent. June, how do you feel Challenger has changed history?
Well, I think a part of the vision of these fellows is to share that we can't rationalize problems away, and that came out loud and clear. And also that I guess you could say that bad things, everyone has bad things that happen to them. And the difference is how we react to them. From the interviews of the families and the engineers and the scientists and the managers, it was a lesson learned for all of us, how they each reacted to the terrible thing that happened in their lives. So whether you lose a loved one or illness or sorrow, terrific sorrow in your life, how we respond to that is what makes the difference. And that's what the families and we wanted to do, is we didn't want the Challenger crew to be remembered only for how they died, but for their mission, for what they were all about. And this teacher's mission was so important. She had a goal of not just teaching lessons, but she wanted to help teachers be recognized as heroes, that they have a legacy to share, and how important and valuable a teacher is. And perhaps she wasn't able to speak about that herself. But through this effort, the Netflix story, I think it is expressed very well that it was important for her as a teacher to bring honor to other teachers.
Wow. Thank you, June. Glenn, Stephen, and Daniel, you know, when you make something like, I read an earlier interview of you, and I think it was mentioned that originally you were thinking this might be a shorter, it originally was scoped out, it was kind of a shorter production, and then as you got into it and got the material, it kind of grew, and you knew you had to make a bigger docuseries. But even then, I'm wondering, what are some of the stories you wish you could have included, but that didn't make the final series? Maybe you just didn't have the room to do it. But I'm wondering if there were some other stories in there you would have loved to have told.
I mean, I think the connection that the shuttle has to the International Space Station is one that we tried and experimented with, and we hope to sort of bake into the process, because you can find them on YouTube. There are these beautiful renderings in the 70s that NASA had, commissioned, of what our life in space was supposed to look like. And the shuttle was going to be the way that the conduit for that. And so we really hope to kind of show that it was going to be space for everyone, not just on the ship, but we were going to live in space. And of course that hasn't quite happened, but the ISS has been running continuously with people from all over the world, and they're still going up and down. And, to know that
20 years.
To know that
20 years.
To know that that's only there because the shuttle was built and was able to help, make that a reality. Although we don't really do it in the series, it is something that is unique and very special. And so that's one piece of the puzzle that, we had to save for, I guess, conversations like this.
Yeah, I think we had, at one point, we had a first episode that was entirely dedicated to the history of the shuttle, and included the International Space Station, and included the grand vision of where the space shuttle fit in. We also talked about how not just Morton Thiokol, but there was a whole network of that it was the nation's shuttle, and that even like a piece of the shuttle, the orbiter's window, was made in upstate New York, and that there was an investment in all of these communities. And at one point that was going to be one of our threads as well, is this community in Utah, that these engineers were not just, they were not just responsible for their company decisions, but in a way they felt responsible for that whole community and that community's part in the shuttle. That was a part of the story that I miss not including, and you get a little sense of it in the series, but there's just a lot of, there's always a lot of pieces that fall by the wayside. And John Denver, John Denver's obsession with the shuttle, we wanted to build a whole sequence around that, but we're not able to.
And the outpost, the bar.
The outpost.
Oh, yeah.
Which
I've been there.
Oh, you're lucky to have gone before it burned down.
Yeah.
The romance of a bar, you don't often hear those kinds of stories of astronauts just being quote unquote normal people, shooting pool, having a beer at the end of the day of work. And the fact that the outpost wasn't just a hangout for astronauts, but everyone from the secretaries in the astronaut office to the administrators, that was something we were very, very keyed up and passionate about including, but we had to be somewhat relentlessly, strict about what our time and how much, people were willing to, go there with us. But that's a beautiful sort of, place and what it stood for. And I'm very jealous that you got to go, Lance.
Yeah, there's
I spent a lot of time there too.
But she did.
a few hangovers from the outpost. It's interesting because it truly is an art, not a science, making these things. And they sort of just tell you when they're right. And so there's a lot of stuff that didn't make it in, but I don't really think that any of us really regret leaving anything out, because it just didn't feel like it was part of the whole cloth. It just didn't feel right in the larger context of the 4 episodes, even though in a vacuum on its own, some of these elements might have been great. This is not really much more than a piece of trivia, but Daniel and Steven filmed more recreations than you see in the project, and they did a beautiful job. We had some recreations of the outpost. They actually filmed a recreation of the story that Barbara Morgan tells of Krista baking an apple pie for her, and it was beautiful. It was wonderfully done. But to their credit, the job that they did, immersing us in that story, where you really feel that you're inside it, that you're there with them, the recreations actually took you out of it, because you didn't need the recreations. You believed you were inside the story from the actual footage and from the interviews from these wonderful families. And so as much love and care as may have gone into creating those recreations, and as good as they turned out, the series was better without it.
Wow, these are great. These are really great. And by the way, that story about the pie from Barbara, the surprising part about that for some of us is that we think of Barbara as like one of the most kindest, the kindest, most thoughtful persons. And here she is telling a story about how somebody else was kinder and more thoughtful than her. So it tells you something about Krista as well. But so that was a great story that you guys got on that. The other question I wanted to ask for Glenn, Stephen, and Daniel while we have you were, what were some of the most memorable personal moments for you during the creation of this series? So, I mean, you kind of mentioned it, like, finding out about the outpost or maybe meeting some of these people, but I'm curious. I mean, this had to be, for you personally, there had to be some moments where like, wow, I'm really, there's something about this that was really great personally.
I'll say this just in relation to that last point about Barbara and Krista is that, especially with an archive as deep as there was of Krista, when you dive into that, sometimes you find people's, you see a little bit under the artifice and there's some flaws there, especially when there's as many platitudes as there were about Krista McAuliffe. And to me, I was constantly surprised at her as a person. And the deeper we went into the archive, the more impressive and amazing, and as June points out so well, how much of the every person she was and why we were all going up on the shuttle with her and how she really was the perfect pick. I mean, as a cynical filmmaker, sometimes you want to scratch underneath that and find flaws to that logic. And Stephen and I couldn't do it because time and time again, the footage and the stories of Krista bore that out of what an incredible person she was.
Yeah, I will add to that. We go in with a very clear roadmap in our heads of what we want these interviews to be and what we're going to talk around. And we tend to talk chronologically because that's just how our brains work. And Daniel and I know, beat by beat, we have, 3 to 4 hours with a subject and we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. But along the way, you find yourself in the cul-de-sacs of people's memory and things come out that they've either never shared publicly or they've not shared with us or we couldn't find in our research. And examples of that would be the Valentine's card with June and the fax that Brian Russell sent. We knew the fax existed and we knew his signature was on it, but we didn't quite know how he would react to the feeling of sending it. And so we handed him the fax to look at, and he just went right back to the moment of sending it. And so to watch him have that experience in the room with us, I just knew that we were capturing something that felt really special and also felt very intimate. And I think the pie is a good example. We did not know that happened or existed. And I'm not even sure Barbara went into it thinking she would tell us that story. And I think it's the power of documentary filmmaking. And I think there's just something about sitting down with a stranger or someone you don't know that well and just opening up. And I think that's what I'm very, very proud about this film is just how intimate it feels and how personal. And I think it's a testament to the gift of what we do. And I'm just grateful to be able to do that. I really believe that it's a special relationship and one that I'm just so grateful that I found it. Because not everybody, finds the thing they're meant to do. And I think we had a wonderful team who all were in alignment with, okay, this is very special. This material is special. So let's really work hard to put it all together in a way that is respectful to everybody and also disarming.
I think the only thing I can add to that is not a specific moment that I found surprising, but something about the process itself that I found surprising, which was, the show's under, it's 3 hours or so in 4 episodes. We spent hundreds of hours making, right? And so we spent hundreds of hours with you, June, and with you, Alison. And so we got to know you far better, at least through your interviews, as much as they can reveal, than you know us. And somewhere towards the end of our process, we already felt a huge weight and responsibility to get this right. But at some point towards the end, as we were wrapping it up, it was just like, oh no, oh, I hope we don't screw this up. We felt there was so much on our shoulders. There was so much invested and we didn't want to disappoint you. And I've never felt pressure like that. And I've been doing this for the better part of a decade. I've never felt anything like that before. And so that was surprising to me because I didn't expect to feel that way. You become cynical making these things after a while. You sort of go into them, as I say, with a cold eye and a warm heart. But that cold eye insulates you somewhat. But there was no insulation for us on this project by the time we were wrapping it up. And needless to say, we're so pleased that that you received it so warmly.
Can I mention one other thing? You're probably remiss to say one of those things that hit the editing room floor. I think we're all disappointed, but it was the right decision. A lot of people mentioned to us in texts and online is one of the engineers, Roger Beaujolais, who was one of the passionate engineers who argued against the flight. We weren't able to include him. We could only include a certain number of voices. And that was a decision on our part, but it's one of those that, you know, when you hear about it, when you hear people online mentioning it, we understand that there are some parts of the story that are lacking or that are missing. And that's just a simple matter of storytelling and time.
It's worth adding too that he's been deceased for a number of years, and we did reach out to his family, but you know, we were very keyed up on the notion that we needed firsthand accounts of everything, and we didn't want second, third-hand stories to sort of rule the day. So it was a tough one. And, you know, had we made this series 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, we might have had that opportunity to include more voices. And I think it just is a testament to the work that we did as directors and as a team to reach out and find who is around and who is still available, who's willing to talk. And I'm very grateful for everyone who participated. I think we shot 26 interviews in something like 7 states all across the country, mostly in people's homes. And now more than ever, I am completely just excited to return to normal so I can go back to meeting strangers in their homes. But I'm grateful that we got to do that last year. And I think getting to sit with people in their homes, as I was saying before, there's something very special about that. So the people who welcomed us in were so generous with their time and opening up their lives and their hearts to us.
Well, I think you guys covered an incredibly complex topic here. I mean, you said it yourself. I mean, the space program has arms into every state. There's, you know, sub-manufacturers made parts. The program itself at its height had hundreds of thousands of people actually on the team to make these things happen. So, and it is, quote, rocket science. So the fact that you pull this together and concisely tell that story was amazing. So Daniel, don't lose any sleep over those comments you're getting. I think it was a phenomenal, you guys made a lot of the right choices. And we're coming close to our end. So I want to make sure there's just a few things I want to make sure we get in here. So June, with the last few minutes, can you talk about the importance of Challenger Center and what it means to you? Because this was important for you to, you know, in this documentary that, you know, that this be a part of it.
Lance, this, and anyone who's listening, I'm sorry. This Netflix story of the Challenger final flight leads right into why and we created Challenger Center and as a response for our loved ones to continue their mission, especially an education mission. Challenger Center frequently gets letters from students who say that it meant so much to them, the opportunity they had to fly a mission at Challenger Center. And now they're an engineer, scientist, working for a space company. And those comments are rewards for us. It wasn't easy to create Challenger Center. A lot of people were naysayers at first. They didn't think we could. But persistence paid off, and a tremendous number of people from all over the world came to help us eventually when they saw what we could do. Not unlike you're pulling together your vision of what this story could be. So to see the youngsters actually on a mission doing what you presented in the documentary. So you see the children working as a team. You see them communicating with one another. You see them at different space stations, working as scientists and engineers and physicians and technical experts. And they are on their own mission, not just a Challenger mission, but it's their specific mission. And they even designed their own patch for their mission. So they're a collaborative team solving problems. I remember Apollo 13 and how all those astronauts and the engineers work together to solve problems. That's what our students do. And the hero in the whole area are the teachers, the classroom teacher that brings a classroom of students to a Challenger Center. So youngsters then come away with knowing, that must be a good career. I'd never thought about working as an engineer. I just received a couple of days ago a letter from a student who said he had read my book after he had been to the Challenger Center, and he is now one of the first employees for the United States Space Force. So look where look the full circle that we've come. And hats off to you, Daniel and Glenn and Stephen and your entire team, especially those wonderful editors that had to clip through all of the work that we do. As you know, Alison and I have lengthy stories, and bless their hearts, they've worked very well to call out the best, and I'm very proud of your work. And I think each of these astronauts would be honored to, if they could speak, to say thank you for telling their story so well. Thank you.
Thank you, June. As you know, it's an honor for me to be a part of Challenger Center that you and the families created. And for more than 3 decades now, Challenger Center has carried on the legacy of your loved ones, the Challenger crew. And our goal is honoring them for the way they live their lives and carrying on their mission of inspiration and education. We're able to do that because of the incredible support of our partners and donors. And so for anybody listening, if you'd like to learn more about the work we do or how you can help us continue to carry on this legacy, I encourage you to just visit our website, which is www.challenger.org. And we'd be happy to talk with you. I see our time's coming to a close, so I just want to say thank you very much, Glenn, Stephen, and Daniel. Thank you for your time, giving us more insight into how the film was made, sharing your personal insights, and really thank you for making this film. I think you heard it clearly, and you knew this, that this has been very cathartic, I think, for our family members, for members of the space community, and the public at large. I think you've done a great service to humanity by making this film, and I think it is an uplifting movie for this time. So I want to thank you personally. I'm looking forward to, and we've done this all kind of a little bit, we were able to start this back when we could all see each other, and I did get to see a few of you in person briefly, but I'd really like at some point for us all to get together personally and have a little more of a celebratory note together. But thank you all, for the 3 of you, for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And June and Alison, thank you for sharing such personal thoughts and stories with us. I'm always touched by your willingness to do this. I know it's hard. You know, this is personal, and you have to share this with everybody in the world. And I don't know how you do it all the time, but I want to thank you as well for your vision, creating this organization, carrying it forward, and making a big impact in so many people's lives to date. So thank you both for being here this evening and for your work with the film.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure, isn't it, Alison?
Yes, great opportunity.
I hope the documentary continues to be well received. I hear from people all over that they're watching and they've seen it. And sometimes they stop me on the street and say, "Are you in disguise?" Of course, I'm wearing a mask and sunglasses. No, I'm not in disguise. But it's a joy, and thank you. And Lance, you're pretty good at that job. I think we'll keep you for a while as our distinguished leader. And I don't know if you guys knew, but he's a rocket scientist himself. And Challenger Center hired him away from his rocket science job to be our leader. And he is a grand and terrific leader for Challenger Center.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lance.
And Glenn, when you were talking earlier, you said something about the weight of doing this right for the families. Now you know what I feel every day here.
Yeah, yes. I got to say very, very quickly, also want to be remiss if we didn't thank both Bad Robot, who gave us so much guidance and so much support, Ben Stevenson, Rachel Rutch-Rich, J.J. Abrams, and Netflix, who also trusted us and allowed us to tell this story and then shared it with the world. And we're so grateful to both Bad Robot and Netflix for being such great partners.
Thank you all. Yeah, and we appreciate all of that as well. It's been, we're honored to have had such broad support and by such luminaries as yourselves. And so thank you all again for tuning in. I hope everybody who's listening has a rest of the wonderful evening, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.